Well, hey, welcome back. It's always good to be here and have my man Matt next to me and uh, joining me for another episode of Breakfast with Bill. Even more important, good to have you guys with us, all of you out there who decide to join us. So thank you so much, Matt. How you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. How about
Mm.
yourself? I know you had a weekend of a lot of silence.
Yeah, last weekend I was on retreat, and our retreats are a silent retreat every year. So I had an opportunity to go Friday evening, and after dinner, we go into silence and we don't speak again till Sunday at noon. So I was able to do a lot of reflection, spend a lot of time inside my head, which sometimes isn't a good thing. But that experience brought me back to reflect on the power of silence and the importance of silence in our lives, especially in a world that's so hectic, a world with so much noise, and not just the noise out there, but the noise that these things bring, right? The noise that comes from our phones, the noise that comes from the constant barrage of information, the world, the noise that the world brings us through, 24-hour news channels and constant news cycles, and what does that do to us? And it made me think about the power of silence, not just in our lives, but in our relationships as salespeople with those we serve. And I think, Matt, you're a big fan of silence and how we use silence in inside of sales cycles. We've talked about it before with the power in negotiating, right? Which we
hmm
might touch on, but there's so much broader space where there's power. There's power in silence.
We see it all the time in the people that we coach, the organizations, the individuals. When we first bring process, and one of the number one places that we start um, are questions, and maybe some more impactful questions. And I want to say it was last week or the week before, we were talking about the different types of questions. And it's interesting that when the salespeople who are coaching for the first time start to develop some new habits and are asking different types of questions, naturally, it's tough to be in silence. And they
Hmm.
feel like they ask a great question, perhaps a one thing question, and there's a little bit of silence because a one thing question is going to strike the receiver a bit different than an anything question or a close ended question. It's going to actually make them think that oftentimes when we're going through that process, we have to remind them it's okay to be in silence. Use silence to your benefit. Silence is okay. It's not negative. It's not that we're not building rapport or we're not hitting it off. Silence could be someone's actually thinking the answer. We asked a great question and we're evoking thought. So use silence to your benefit.
And Matt, why do you think so many salespeople are uncomfortable with silence? Why do you think so many of them was, when they ask that great question, it gives somebody pause and has them sitting, and there's that awkward silence between the two. Why do you think so many people rush to fill that silence?
Well, I think salespeople believe, for the most part, hopefully not the individuals that we coach and interact, that they're proving their worth, their merit by the things that they have to say, and so that
Mhm.
that silence is extremely uncomfortable. But we believe one of our core principles is that you guide conversations with the questions you ask, not the information that you have to give. So in our process, that silence is not only beneficial, but we should be very comfortable in that. That means we're
Mhm.
probably living in discovery correctly. We're making people think about their needs, their desires, their buying process. So, for all those out there that are uncomfortable in silence, I'd ask, why?
Mhm.
Why are you? And then perhaps, Bill, you could talk about how do we get more comfortable if we're uncomfortable in silence?
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. That salespeople think they're paid by the word, right? And too often times, and too many salespeople think they're paid by the word of what they share versus the information they gain and ask. So, when we think about that silence, you started down the path of what's happening. So, what is happening when there's silence on the other end? I think one of the things that's happening is somebody is thinking. They're thinking deep about the answer. And a lot of people are reflective and they need that time. They're thinking about the answer. Sometimes they're also searching for the answer because
Hmm.
they don't know the answer. They don't know what they might never have done this before, right? The things we're asking them might be the first time they've heard that question. So they're searching and they're reaching and they're thinking about, well, what would happen? Matt, one of the things we like to ask is, hey, if things were to go well next week and this were to work, what happens next? Can you walk me through the process? And people sometimes are trying to figure that out. So I think one of the reasons that another reason I should say why people are uncomfortable with silence is because of how courteous they are. So many of the people we work with are kind and courteous, and we have this awkward silence, this uneasiness where somebody's searching for an answer and they're squirming in the seat a little bit. And what do? We jump in to rescue them. But what we actually should be doing is giving them the time to think, giving them the time to process. I would offer that giving them that time in silence is actually a gift to them. It's actually the most courteous thing we can be doing. And allowing, now, if you're sitting there for 15 seconds and somebody's obviously in pain and they don't want to talk, okay, maybe we help inch them along. But giving somebody that gap of silence to let them think, let them search, let them come to some realization, that's a gift. The other thing that we need to remember about silence, right, is when we let silence exist inside the conversation between statements, we're giving people freedom to share. We're giving them that gift of time. And how many times have we been in a conversation where as soon as you finish the sentence and you start to breathe, right? You pause and just to take a breath, the other person jumps in and starts hitting you with more words and they're sharing and they're sharing. Where when we see people pausing, if we don't jump in, if we let some of that silence linger, if we let that silence sit, what you find is the other person might have more to share. And we give them that invitation by the silence we extend.
Hmm. I think it was critical what you said there. I call it the life raft. That when we are in silence and we're uncomfortable in silence as a salesperson, we automatically start throwing out the life raft. So think about what that does. If we're asking a great question and someone's soul searching or working through the process in their mind, and we throw out, um, is it price, or is it the functionality of it, or is it because of the team? You're giving them an option to simply say, yeah, yeah, that's it. Go ahead, Bill.
What about if we start answering unasked questions in that time, Matt? How many times have you seen people as soon as there's a pause or as soon as there's some silence, they start saying, "Oh, and by the way, it has a guarantee." And oh, by the way, if that's not good for you, make us an offer. And they start negotiating against themselves, or they start answering unasked questions that set us back, and implement more roadblocks versus just extending that gift of silence, that gift of time to somebody to let them share.
Hmm. And I distinctly remember, and you probably remember this because you hired me out of college. And I know I shared this story, but I'm sitting in the cubicle, my first job, cold calling. And I'd give them my spiel, a pitch, way too many features and benefits at that point of my career. And after this, long dissertation, I'd ask for a meeting, and people were probably confused what I was even talking about because I talked their ear off. And anytime after I asked for a meeting, if there was a second of silence, I would start saying, "But it's okay. I know you're busy." Or it's okay. It's okay if it's not the right time of year. Or
Uh,
it's okay if you're not the person.
I'll call
And
you back in a year. How about I put you in my tickler file and I
E-
can
e-
just call you right?
exactly. And then, fast forward to today, however many years, I love silence
Yeah.
because silence for me is that fertile ground that allows the truth to come out, that allows discovery to happen. There's
Mhm.
nothing that I like more than asking a question and being able to sit in silence. And a key, something else I did horribly wrong early in my career is I didn't watch my body language. If you ask a tough question, a direct question, my
Mhm.
resting face is serious, and I am serious when I sell. And I
Are you
remember I would,
suggesting? Are you suggesting you have a resting serious face, Matt, or might
yes,
it be called
yes,
something else? Yeah.
please coin that, by the way. We have to brand that. So I'm asking these questions that are making people think, that are challenging in some cases, and I'm staring at them. So the power of asking a really tough question and being able to smile, right?
Hmm.
Or to ask it. And another thing that we've talked about is to look down and, take notes,
Hmm.
is really, really critical. And for those people that aren't comfortable in silence right now, make sure you're taking notes and just go to your notebook. And,
Yeah,
and it will allow you to be more comfortable in silence.
Matt, that's so huge. I mean, because too often, like you said, you're resting serious face. When we ask a tough question, then you're staring at somebody like waiting for the answer, right? Nobody's comfortable with this. But if you say, "So tell me, what would that look like for you
Yeah.
guys?" And you look down, and I like to smile maybe, and or look down and write, scribble a note, going back to a note we took before. And when you don't have that intensity of the eye contact,
Hmm.
yet we're looking down and we're letting them know we're capturing something, it makes people more vulnerable in a way. Like, it makes them more receptive to sharing versus the stare down. So,
Yeah.
and you asked earlier how people get more comfortable with silence. That's one way. I love to look down and just like take a note, just let that air be, sit, and not make somebody feel like they're on trial, but give them the opportunity to think themselves and go to that place where they're looking for the answers and the information.
Hmm. And just quickly, there's as you were talking before, I was jotting a few notes down. A couple key opportunities that we can zero in on and probably get more comfortable with being in silence. And I think the first one is when we ask a one thing question.
Hmm.
One thing questions, let's go out there and practice after we ask that. And again, the receiver, it just strikes them differently, right?
Hmm.
It has so much more impact and punch to it than just, a fluffy cotton candy type of question that we could ask. And that's a very technical term, by the way, of an anything question. But when we ask a one thing question, how about when we ask for a referral? Do we
Hmm.
give them enough time, and are we comfortable enough in that moment? For many of us, asking for referrals, um, it isn't natural. And we've talked about referrals before, and this is near and dear to I could think of many of our clients' hearts right now, because I'm going through some referral process with them.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to they're just not real comfortable asking. So the second opportunity, when we ask for a referral, pause, be in
Yeah.
silence, and allow them to actually think. Is another opportunity.
It's
Um,
amazing you brought that one up, by the way, Matt, because we're going through this with a client where we're working with them on how they do ask for referrals and some client reviews, and one of the things I'm amazed by is how they tell me, oh, I asked for referrals. I said, tell me how.
mhm.
And it's essentially this, right? If there's ever anyone who you might think could possibly use our services, we would appreciate that. That's not a referral. Matt talks about cotton candy language. What's that mean? Well, cotton candy, when it hits the tongue, what's it do? Dissolves. It's gone. No nutritional value, nothing remains. There's nothing to chew on, there's nothing to swallow. Cotton candy hits the tongue and it dissolves. When we soften our language to that point of if there's ever anyone, and oftentimes, Matt, anything questions, as we talk about, versus one thing questions, anything questions are cotton candy language, right?
Mhm.
Is there any reason you wouldn't work with us? Is there anything you need from me to make this happen? Is there anything else we should be doing? We're not giving people permission to tell the truth, especially when we fill the gap, the silence gap with words, versus, Matt, who's the one person you think we could help? And like Matt said, actually sit and listen and let them, if they have somebody, actually tell us before we say, and by the way, if you don't know now, that's okay. You can email it to me, or that's okay if you don't have somebody now. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Mhm.
We're not doing them the service. I'm sorry, Matt. I think I cut you off there.
No, no, that's quite all right. That's additive, obviously, for that. So, when we ask a one thing question, when we ask for a referral, how about how many of us are comfortable asking for budget or spend that we talk about the financial impact, so that F of the acronym.
Hmm.
How many of us are comfortable asking that
Hmm.
and being able to be in silence? And I find that's often an opportunity to throw that life raft out,
Hmm.
and we start to water it down, and we start to play what is that, mother may I, can I please have it your budget,
Yeah.
or where you're trying to be around, or
Roughly ballpark numbers. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
when asking for the budget, I think that's a great opportunity. And then one final one, and don't want to bring up if we lose, because none of us want to lose, and sales is not a participation sport. But we're not going to win every sales cycle. So how about when we debrief with them and ask the one reason why? I think that's
Mhm.
another opportunity that we have to be comfortable in silence and not throw the life raft out. I think when I was explaining it before, I actually had that scenario in my mind when we say, what's the one reason why? Was it price? And now we're giving them that opportunity to say, yep, no doubt. Because I believe people are inherently good and they don't want to deliver bad news.
Right.
And,
Right.
they feel like, wow, we built rapport and we're not going with them. So, be careful in that, because I think it's critical that we have that, that recap phase where we evaluate, win or lose, the end of the sales cycle, for getting better, becoming more effective.
So we understand what we do well and what we need to improve. So, and that's kind of the end of the content portion. We do have an exercise Matt wanted us to go through, and that is Matt wanted to illustrate the power of silence. So we're going to take the next 15 minutes and just sit here and stare and let you experience some silence. That's a joke. We're not going to do that. That's all we got. We hope you guys become a little more comfortable with silence this week. And by the way, that silence that I left between saying we're going to leave you at 15 minutes and speaking was less than 2 seconds. And one thing we would encourage you to do is actually time silence. Look at your watch, look at an egg timer. If you're in role play, if you practice with yourself, if you have somebody in your office that you work with, make a statement, say something, and then sit in silence and time it and start to get a feel for how long that is. Because when we're in silence, 2 seconds feels like 2 minutes, and 3 seconds feels like 3 days. So just sit in silence, get used to that silence, know what it feels like. It'll give you the ability to start controlling your emotions and controlling your tempo, controlling your heart rate, controlling your nerves when you get to that point. So, hopefully, you can inject some moments of silence this week into your selling, into your personal life, so that you can refresh and recharge, that you can take the noise away and allow you to renew and refresh. We appreciate the time you give us, and thanks again for being with us. We'll see you next week. Take care and God bless.